Thank you very much, and thank you everyone for joining this conversation we were having. I'll get right to the point. We were having the conversation earlier about how Trump is changing the world, and I think I would like to start from there, if I may. Indrani, I'll come to you first in the sense of if you know the panel is about the eastern flank, the China challenge essentially. How do you see the China challenge evolve? I mean, we have had two interesting developments in the last few months. One, our own rapprochement, so-called, with the Chinese, right? We have managed to resolve some of the problems on the border. And the other is, of course, Mr. Trump himself coming. Now, are they related, first of all? Do you see that a relationship there, that perhaps Indians and the Chinese thought that a whirlwind is coming, so maybe we need to get together and do something about it? Or do you see the coming of Mr. Trump further complicating the kind of strategic clarity that came in with the Galwan crisis and post-Galwan, certain things that India did, which led to a certain kind of a balance in the relationship? So how do you see this, this trifecta of US, India, China evolving in the age of Mr. Trump?
Thank you, Harsh, and thank you, Chanakya Forum. Thank you, Major Arya, for inviting me here this morning. I don't think they're unrelated. And I would actually hesitate to call it a rapprochement, more like a quasi-normalization. And I don't think there is any lack or any diminution of the strategic clarity that certainly India had when the Galwan crisis broke out in 2020. But it's not just the Galwan crisis. If you are looking for enhanced or increased strategic clarity vis-a-vis China, I would go back all the way to 2017 during the Doklam crisis. And frankly, it was the Doklam crisis that impelled India to re-embrace the Quad. If you remember back then, it was Trump 1.0, and it was Trump who moved a rather dormant Quad grouping to a political grouping. And India jumped on the bandwagon with much greater alacrity than it had in its previous iteration. And I think that clarity has continued. It was sharpened after 2020. For the last 1 year at least, it has been fairly clear. I'd say even Biden, to be fair to him, Biden carried on with almost all the work that Trump had started vis-a-vis China. Whether it was the small yard, high fence that Samir talked about, whether it was restricting China's access to advanced technologies, all of that has been carried on by Biden from Trump. And you can see Trump taking the same, basically taking the same baton and running with it at a different pace, of course. Just yesterday, I think Trump added another set of 10% tariffs to China. But it's not just tariffs. It is literally, China is the challenger America never believed it would have. But to go back to the India-China issue, I think a part of the normalization that happened pre-Trump, rather pre-US elections, was to also take off the table an issue that could be leveraged against India. You don't want somebody coming in. We've always been very clear that we solve our problems ourselves, or at least we deal with our problems ourselves. And the fact that you went ahead and took the 5 steps or 4 steps that we had to was also important. It was also an important signal both to Chinese and to the Americans. To the Chinese, that we deal with you on our own. To the Americans, that we can deal with our problems We may need your help sometimes, but we are not a dependent nation in the way that Europe has made itself to be. So I think there were several political messages that went out as part of that normalization process.
Thank you. Admiral Kumar, I would take on from where she left. In a sense, looking at what perhaps the maritime landscape looks like at this point, and if you look at the rise of the Indo-Pacific discourse, if you look at, I mean, she talked about Quad, and it was dormant, and then suddenly it was revived, and it has been in a sort of a more active phase since then. And I'll come to Quad in a bit, but before that, if you can just assess from a national security point of view, how does the maritime space look like at this point? I mean, because there are multiple flashpoints way beyond India's periphery. Now, of course, Indo-Pacific is where India operates. But if you think of South China Sea, East China Sea, and Taiwan Strait, these are explicit flashpoints that have the potential of perhaps being the first order of priority for the Chinese. From our perspective, of course, Indian Ocean being the dominant theater, how do you look at the maritime security landscape there, given that so much focus for the last few years has been on the territoriality of the India-China relationship and those issues? Do you see them the maritime issues declining in salience in some ways, and have we been able to put enough resources and commitment to manage the maritime flux that is happening in the Indo-Pacific?
Yeah, actually, if you remember, I think last year, the Honorable Raksha Mantri made a statement that India is now an island nation with land borders. I mean, it's a profound change in perspective. And if you look at even a little further back, you find when India was the chair of the Security Council, we had initiated need for dialogue on maritime security. And now in Bharat, we have a maritime security advisor. So overall, something which I used to call as sea blindness, which was inherent in Delhi for a long time. Emperor Akbar apparently had never seen the sea, or he had seen it once in his entire lifetime. Sort of a mindset used to be there. We were a continental of a mindset. So that has changed. It is changing, and from sea blindness, we have moved on to maritime consciousness, and subsequently, I think we have to move towards maritime thought as to how will we use it for our advantage. As Alfred Mahan had said, the need for a navy rises with the need for peaceful shipping and disappears with it. So a country like ours, who are looking at becoming the third largest economy in the world, obviously, it means that there is going to be more and more trade, and 90% of our trade by volume has to go through the sea because of the inherent qualities of the maritime domain. And transportation by sea is, at least till the distant future, it's going to remain the cheapest and the most effective means of transportation. When you compare road is to rail is to water, it is 1:10:100. So for the same amount of energy. So therefore, unless something like quantum transportation or something comes where instantaneously you can transfer huge goods across in a fraction, this is going to remain there. We have had a maritime tradition, a long maritime tradition of trade, etc. in our oceans. What we talk about the IMEC today actually had existed. We had trade 5,000 years back with Oman, Mesopotamia, all these places. So this is a reality, and we are trying to ensure that we get our rightful place back. There have been, Indian Ocean is a peculiar ocean which has got so many choke points, and we are aware of the Malacca dialogue which the China has been talking about, and the other choke points of Sunda, Lombok, Mumbai Vatar, and so on. So while we say what are the challenges, on the eastern flank, I would say there are a lot of opportunities as well now. For example, the way we are dealing with Philippines, way we are looking at supporting Indonesia, or when we talk of Indo-Pacific, we talk of the centrality of ASEAN, and that has remained a core issue there. The IPOI initiatives, where we are looking at a IPMDA, Indo-Pacific MDA sort of thing, along with the Quad nations. So all this is helping us, develop the awareness of the ocean, primarily the Indian Ocean, I would say, and then extending into the Pacific, South China Sea, and beyond as well. So many people have asked, why does the Indian Navy not, look at operating in the South China Sea, etc. Well, we do operate, but I would say, why do we need to operate there? The entire trade of China, the oil, everything flows from here, through the Indian Ocean, and that's a strong point. Geography, our resources, everything we are able to have much greater control, here. Be aware of who's there present, what they're up to, and so on. So, as a military, for the Navy, I agree that there are a lot of shipbuilding activities happening in China. I presume, they're around 390 plus, heading towards 500. Probably they will peak somewhere there. We are at about 130, 135. Probably, in 10 years' time, I see it, going up to about 170. But it's not a, bean count when you talk of, navies. It's based upon interest, maritime interest. And I'm glad that, now as a nation, we are conscious of our interests, and, we are articulating it as well, without any, without any double speak, I would say. And what Lord Palmerston had said, we have no eternal allies, we have no perpetual enemies, but our interests are both eternal and perpetual, and it's our duty, and those interests, it's our duty to follow. I think finally, I see much focus on pursuing our interests. External Affairs Minister has articulated very clearly. When he was asked, I think, you're on whose side? He says, we are on India's sides. So, so I'd say that the maritime domain is not really benign, but there is great awareness now, and a lot of support in terms of whether it is funding or leadership support, etc., for enhancing the our capabilities in the maritime. And it's not just the naval power; it's also shipbuilding, the infrastructure, the ports, and so on. And in this budget, you saw 25,000 crores being earmarked for the maritime development fund, and another about 6,000 plus crores for development of port infrastructure. So I think we are well on the way to develop our maritime capabilities and the capacity, so that we are able to meet the needs of becoming the third largest economy in the world.
Thank you. Indrani, both you and Admiral Kumar talked about this awareness. You talked about strategic clarity has not gone away. He talked about a greater consciousness about our interests, and particularly from his perspective, the maritime landscape and how it has evolved. I think one of the challenges that often comes in looking at the eastern flank or the China question is this dichotomy between the economic interdependence and the national security imperatives that India faces. And I think we have seen that even through our very difficult phase of Galwan, that that our trade continued to increase despite all the attempts being made. And one of the reasons many people have argued for what you call cautious normalization is, of course, has to do with the hard economics, the fact that that cannot be wished away, that we need, even, for example, the project of self-reliant India is contingent on developing manufacturing capacity, which relies on imports from China. So conceptually, when you think about this question, or when we think about this question, how do we rationalize this? How do we think about managing this conundrum that we are continuing to increase our dependence in certain sectors on China, and at the same time, the national security imperative of perhaps decoupling is ever so great? Many countries are facing this challenge, and India is not the exception. But because of the peculiar problem that we face both on our borders and on our both territorial borders and maritime borders, how do you think about it, or how should the public policy conversation on this proceed? Because this continues to, I think, be the biggest question around China and managing China, dealing with China. You often come down to the brass tacks that it is about economics.
Right. No, you're absolutely right, Harsh. There is that dilemma that India faces. Part of it is, it's not just India, a greater part of the world, we had outsourced manufacturing to China. It was cheap, it was easy, and until the reality check that the pandemic provided, or until the difficulties, the strategic difficulties that arose between India and China and sharpened in the past decade, we were complacent, like the many parts of the world. Otherwise, say for just as an example, we are a pharma superpower. Yet we thought nothing of outsourcing the production of our APIs to China until the rude shock of the pandemic forced us to rethink. So we've been forced to rethink on a number of areas. And this is not new, just by the way. Back in 2008, 2009, Indian power plants were importing large scale, or rather wholesale, components or entire power plants from China. The national security question was flagged even then, that we were becoming too dependent on China, because obviously when China sells stuff to you, they don't, I mean, Samit spoke about the entire ecosystem on a defense platform. They don't sell the entire ecosystem. They sell it to you, and then you are dependent on them for an entirely different system, because you don't get the spares, you don't get to do any of that stuff. But we have been taking it lightly. I cannot say that we had an epiphanic moment in either the pandemic or Galwan. We've been having series of epiphanic moments. We've not sort of closed the loop on that. So we are starting from a much lower base. However, the question of the dilemma between the economic dependence and the strategic difficulties is to speed up what we call the supply chain resilience. And that supply chain resilience is a question that we have been tackling for the last 5 years, certainly, because it literally was a term invented during the pandemic. To build that resilience will imply that India has to rethink how it does both its manufacturing and how it does its sourcing or creating supply chains. Today you are battling with the supply chains for semiconductors, but you look at supply chains for a whole lot of other manufacturing areas. And it is building that resilience or building that redundancy in supply chains that is the crucial part. It is not an easy task, and we are literally, we may have just set out after the starter gun. So I think this dilemma will continue. China will weaponize, just so we know, China will weaponize its supply chains. You can see it's already doing that on the Apple front. They've been stopping exports of equipment. They've been stopping exports of people and technicians. China will weaponize. And we know that. We cannot that morning wake up and say, oh my God, these Chinese are terrible people. We know what they've been doing and they will continue to do it. So you have to take preemptive measures, and preemptive thinking, preemptive strategizing is absolutely imperative in India, whether it is in the national security domain or whether it's in the economics and manufacturing domain.
Can I just add on this? I'd like to say that, there is definite awareness and consciousness and actions are in hand on this, in this regard. So when you talk of Atmanirbhar, nation, it may not be possible for us to make everything in our country, but so long as you are able to make the key components, the things which really matter, and that is where I think we are focusing. The low-end stuff, it doesn't matter where it comes from, because in times of need, like if it is steel which is coming from China, we are able to make our own steel today. So warship grade steel or military grade steel, etc., that is required. So that technology is there with us. So if it's cheaper and we are importing it, so be it. So my point is that when it comes to semiconductors, the chips or the software, etc., that has to be Atmanirbhar. So that is where I think the focus is on, and the low-end stuff really doesn't matter so much.
Can I have a 1 second intervention? Which is, and Admiral, you spoke about steel. One of the things that happen, and this is the dilemma we live with. We did put tariffs on Chinese steel, okay? But we also you can't say that, oh, if it comes from China, we will stop it, really. But you put tariffs on imported steel, we also put tariffs on Japanese steel, which basically means half your car's important components don't get made, or the prices go up. So there is a problem there. You cannot, if you take a sort of one size fits all approach, and you have to, in the name of fairness, then...
Do we have to? I mean, that's a question. I mean, where is fairness in this? No one is fair in international relations. I mean, Trump is being transactional all over. There are certain areas where we can do much more. And I think, your point about writing on the wall has been there for a long time.
For a long time.
And I think when there is a crisis, we are very good at managing those crises. Crises go away, we forget the crisis. Exactly. And I think that has been a problem. Right. Even with the China question, it has been a problem. So many times in the past, we have seen that. So the worry is whether the momentum that we have generated, and I think that's where I began the conversation, that strategic clarity that crisis forced that on us, that moment has gone, and whether we will also go away with that moment, I think that's essentially the question which we need to think about. But Admiral, one of the things which I find particularly interesting, when we are looking at it from the maritime context, and I'll also look at it from the diplomatic political context, and I'll come to Indrani on that, is this question of the Quad. Now, we have seen Quad's revival in 2017. We have seen it going from strength to strength in a certain way. And there is a very interesting debate about whether it should be a security platform, whether it should be purely non-security. And we have, I think, the consensus at the moment amongst the 4 countries is that let it be low-key. Let's not talk about Quad as a security framework. It was very interesting that Mr. Trump, in his press conference with Prime Minister Modi, talked of Quad as a security platform. Now, the question that I have for you is, how comfortable would India be if Mr. Trump tomorrow decides that I want to securitize Quad, overt securitization of Quad? I know there have been issues around it in this country, but how seriously should we take this as a challenge? Because this can be one element of transactionalism, right? That I want Quad to be something which overtly securitizes the problem, and India would feel that it is uncomfortable with it, or India might feel it would be uncomfortable with it. So that's one part. The other issue in terms of transactionalism might come, say tomorrow there is a crisis in Taiwan Strait. I mean, you mentioned the fact that why should we operate in South China Sea elsewhere? Our focus area is Indian Ocean. But that may not work with someone like Mr. Trump. It may not work with Americans anymore because they would also demand that, look, we also expect India to do certain things, at least figuratively, if not operationally maybe. So where do we stand on these big questions? I have not seen a very, a robust debate on these questions in India so far, at least in the strategic community, because it means going granular, right? What India can do, for example, operationally, say in Taiwan Strait. It is one thing to say, let's not think about it. But I think we are way past that point where we should not be thinking about these contingencies. So what exactly can, in terms of your assessment, if it comes to the crunch, what would our options be other than just saying that no, we are not going to be part of it?
Oh, see, when you talk of the Quad, our national leadership, especially I've seen the External Affairs Minister very clearly articulate that it is not a security mechanism. It doesn't have any treaty alliances. It doesn't have any organizational setup, etc. It's just a coming together of nations, democratic nations, and now the Honorable Prime Minister has said it's a coming together of maritime democracies, to take forward certain agendas. And what are those agendas? Peace and stability, COVID-19, global health, management, and HADR, and maritime domain awareness, and so on. So there is, I would say, while there is some element, when you talk of peace, stability, MDA, etc., it overtly, in a sense, it talks of some components which are connected to security. But it doesn't, like as the External Affairs Minister said, it is for something. It is not against somebody. So that has been the view of the political leadership, and I don't think there will be any change in that perspective. I have attended a number of these meetings during my tenure as a chief. Our position on this is quite well understood. We've had exercises like the Malabar, where essentially it is the Quad countries who participate, Japan, Australia, us, and UK and US. And that's one exercise which has achieved a very high level of interoperability. So while it does portray certain things and sends a message to those who want to see it, it is not spelled out in that terms. So I have my doubt whether we will securitize it like AUKUS or anything like that, because we have not been doing it at all, and everywhere our national leadership has been very clearly articulating that it is our interest, and what we see is issue-based convergences, where it is in our interest we converge, where it is not we don't, and we have not been making any bones about it. So I feel that is how it is going to be. And you are asking about this, the second part of what your question was, if required, if we are required to, we have achieved a fairly good level of interoperability in the maritime domain with the Quad navies.
Indrani, similar question to you from a political point of view. Does it matter that we don't talk about Quad as a platform that it is against? Chinese understand it. I think it's for our comfort level that we say it is not for anyone else. But Chinese are very categorical as to what Quad is for. So in that sense, the overt securitization politically, how problematic that would be. There is a good diplomatic logic to it that, look, a lot of the countries don't want to come into the crosshairs of US, China. So your engagement with, for example, ASEAN would become very problematic if you make it overtly security platform. But if Mr. Trump makes it, demands that, what are the red lines that we can draw there, and should we be drawing those red lines in this case?
From just having followed the Quad from 2004, I'll say that the Quad is literally India's most important geopolitical grouping. There is nothing that comes close. It doesn't matter if it doesn't have a secretariat, it doesn't matter if there is no institution there. Over the years, the strategic clarity that we spoke about vis-a-vis India, China, the strategic clarity of the Quad has only sharpened. And while the over-securitization doesn't mean, I agree with Admiral Kumar about the fact that, we're not in the business of treaty alliances, etc. 3 out of the 4 are treaty allies. But I also look at something else. The more we are buying American platforms, particularly in maritime security, in that domain, whether it is the drones or whether it's the Poseidon, whatever, you are automatically building a different level of interoperability, because then you are not rejigging your technology for Russia legacy platform to be talking to an America legacy platform. You are actually in the same ecosystem. And the more you enter that sphere, the easier that interoperability becomes. So whether you spell it out about the securitization of the alliance, I think it is happening organically. And it is happening at different levels. Now, why do you not talk about it? I don't think it actually serves anybody's interests to talk about it. For instance, I mean, you look at Australia. Australia was the reason why Quad 1 failed. Today, Australia is also trying to make nice with the Chinese. The Japanese are also trying to make nice with the Chinese. Japan has just announced complete visa-free travel for every Chinese.
For that matter, Trump might also decide.
Exactly. There might be a G2 there as well. Or somebody could look at our own normalization and say, hey, are you guys becoming friends again? So I don't see any reason for that. But look at something else. Look at how this is becoming what I call a technology alliance. It is not just a security alliance. It is setting the rules of the road for tomorrow's technology future. And just so we are all clear about this, technology is foreign policy. There is nothing else that defines foreign policy or national interests more than technology. Because where you make your technology choices is where you make your economic choices and where you make your geopolitical choices. We have entered that world and we are not getting away from that world. There is a very good reason why we took away the Huawei and the ZTE from the Indian 5G system, and why we created it largely on our own with help from 2 nations that are on the other side of the planet. But there is a reason. So you made that technology choice because you have a geopolitical choice that you make. And the same goes for the Quad. If you look at the technology rules that are being set, whether it's in biotechnology, in biosecurity, whether it's in semiconductors or AI, how the governance of these, this is all part of a future, a world that we are entering, where we want to be the ones shaping the rules, not the ones who are the target of the rules. So that's how I would look at the Quad.
I think that's a good point to close this session on, and I have a nagging sensation that a lot of these points that we have raised will be part of the panels going forward as well, because the China question, the Trump question that we have been discussing since morning are the questions that perhaps every single panel of the day would also address in their own way. So thank you, Admiral, thank you, Indrani, for this for a lovely chat.